We all remember the good years of Dwight Howard. Alright, we all remember the good years of Dwight Howard on the Orlando Magic, where he was by far the most dominant center in the league and looked like an MVP level player for most of his time there. But then we fast forward to today and we've seen just how much things have changed. Almost 7 years later, and Dwight has never been close to that same person he was on the Magic. But what a lot of people have been talking about is, does Dwight belong in the Hall of Fame? Was his time in Orlando enough to say he's a Hall of Famer? Or has he ruined his legacy by failing to live up to the hype on every other team he's been on since then? And that's what we're going to be finding out today. So we're going to look at the case he makes for why he doesn't deserve the Hall of Fame, and then the case for why he does deserve to be in it. And then at the end, you guys can decide for yourselves in the comments on whether or not he really belongs. So let's get into it. It's clear that Dwight made his case for the Hall of Fame on the Magic. So to make a case of why he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, we'll start from right when he left Orlando. He left in 2012 to go to the Los Angeles Lakers, but within that time he had to have back surgery. So he was never really the same Dwight Howard when he got there. But whether he played at the same level or not, that doesn't take away from him not getting along with Kobe. They never admitted to it publicly, but something tells me they were lying. And it obviously makes sense why they didn't work together. Even though Kobe's one of the greatest players of all time, most of his teammates would agree he's one of the worst teammates because of how arrogant he is and how much he talks down to his teammates that he doesn't think are putting in the same amount of effort that he is. So you pair that up with Dwight Howard, who's always smiling and laughing and just trying to have a good time, and that's definitely not a good combination. Shaq was real similar to Dwight off the court, but the reason Shaq worked with Kobe was because he knew once he stepped on the court, it was time to take things serious and bring his team a win. So after the Lakers, Dwight moved to the Houston Rockets to play with James Harden. And almost right off the bat, the two of them weren't on the same page. Within the 3 years that he played there, an unnamed Rockets player said that in the locker room, you had to choose whose side to be on, whether you were going to talk to Dwight Howard or James Harden. Harden didn't like Dwight Howard because he said Dwight didn't take the game serious enough, and Howard would get upset because he didn't think he would get the ball enough. But it wasn't only Harden that wouldn't pass him the ball, it was the Rockets team as a whole, and former coach Kevin McHale, that if they didn't like how Dwight Howard was playing, or the effort he was giving, they would purposely keep the ball away from him and keep him from getting involved that night. Today, Dwight said that he wishes him and Harden communicated better because they were both people that if they had a problem, they wouldn't confront someone about it, they'd just let it play out. So the Rockets were on Harden's side, as they should have been, and Dwight got moved again to his hometown team in the Atlanta Hawks, where not only after one season did they trade him to, but it was reported that a few Hawks players screamed out of happiness when the news came out that he was traded. And then finally we saw what played out last season. He still put up big numbers, but unsurprisingly, more reports came out that his Hornets teammates didn't like him either, and said that he wasn't worth the headache. So not only did they trade him, but they sent him to Brooklyn so the Nets could waive him just to get rid of him. And that's how he ended up on the Wizards today. Now we've got a lot of things to take away from this. It's clear that since leaving the Magic, every team Dwight's played on, none of his teammates have liked him or his personality. He went from an all-star who loved to have fun to a player that everyone finds annoying. And it's not just on the court. We all know that Shaq and Charles Barkley have been his biggest critics throughout the years, and Dwight even said in an interview that he doesn't hang out with any other NBA players. His reasoning was because he has too much respect for them, but come on, they just don't like him. So we have the fact that at this point, he hasn't been liked on any of the teams he's been on since the Magic, so we've got to believe that at this point, those teams probably underachieved because he threw off their team chemistry. And then there's the fact that the NBA has been moving away from the use of traditional centers like himself, but that's okay because Dwight said he's going to be an Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant type player next year. Come on, Dwight, what are you doing? But seriously, we're not going to sit here and say that's been the reason that he hasn't been the same Dwight, because we saw DeAndre Jordan, who doesn't know what a jump shot is, still make the All-Star team in 2017 and put up solid numbers consistently. As a matter of fact, we still see Dwight Howard put up some solid numbers. He's averaged 16, 12, and nearly 2 blocks a game since he left Orlando. But it's the fact that those numbers just don't translate to wins anymore, and he constantly gets criticized for being lazy on the court. And just as an example of a couple of cases against Dwight, he was trained by Hakeem Olajuwon for a lot of his time on the Rockets, but Hakeem eventually said that the training was a waste of his time because Dwight would do what he taught him at first, but then eventually he would always go back to his bad habits. And even Kobe said that he tried to teach Dwight the attitude and mentality you have to win a championship, but it made Dwight Howard feel uncomfortable, and he was never able or willing to change his attitude on the court. And then when he was on the Hawks, a few Hawks players talked about how there would be times where he would try to be a leader and huddle everyone up before the game and tell them how they need to give it their all and how they needed to get a win that night, and then he would go out there and jog up and down the court and set lazy screens. And eventually that was one of the reasons all the Hawks players turned on him. And stories like this are just a couple of examples of why most of these teams probably turned on him in general. Alright, so that's the case against Dwight belonging in the Hall of Fame. So now let's look back at the good times. I said the good times to his prime to see why he does belong in the Hall of Fame. The man played on the Orlando Magic for 8 seasons. And within that time, he was a 6-time All-Star, a 5-time member of the All-NBA First Team, a 3-time consecutive Defensive Player of the Year, a 4-time member of the All-NBA First Team, a 5-time rebounding leader, and a 2-time leader in blocks. Now, Howard never won any championships or never won an MVP, but he did lead a bad Magic team to the NBA Finals in 2009. And finished second in MVP voting in 2011 behind Derrick Rose. And let's be honest, not many people would have beaten Rose for MVP that year. Now, accomplishments aren't everything that take a player into the Hall of Fame, but they do really help a player's case because they establish how good that player was within the time period that he played. So let's stack these up to some other players that have made the Hall of Fame but never won an MVP award or an NBA championship. And we have to mention that we can't include Yao Ming or Dikembe Mutombo in these, because while they might have been inducted for what they did on the court, they were just as much inducted into the Hall of Fame for what they did for the sport of basketball as a whole on a global level. So let's look at George Gervin, who's thought of as one of the greatest scorers of all time and was inducted in 1996. He played for the Spurs for 9 seasons in the NBA, was a 9-time NBA All-Star, a 5-time member of the All-NBA First Team, a 4-time scoring champion, and he averaged 26 points a game in his NBA career. Pause. Now in these comparisons, in no way am I getting into the argument of who's the better player overall or any of that, but I'm laying out these achievements to compare how good Dwight was in the time period that he played to how good these guys who have already made the Hall of Fame were in the time period that they played. Now let's look at Reggie Miller. At the time, Reggie Miller was really the greatest three-point shooter the league had seen and one of the most clutch players, but he barely has any achievements or standout stats to back it up. He was a 5-time All-Star and a member of the 50-40-90 club, and that's it. He did play for the Pacers for 18 seasons and averaged 18 a game for his career on 47% shooting and 40% from 3. Now Reggie was the type of player to score when it mattered, and he did a lot of things that didn't show up on the stat sheet, but Dwight was a far better defender and had far better stats and achievements. And then there's a guy like Patrick Ewing, and even though Ewing's the better overall player, Dwight's achievements dominates Ewing's because he was only an 11-time All-Star and a 1-time member of the All-NBA First Team. And then there's this last one, a player who mirrors Dwight Howard's career the most out of everyone on this list. The guy that was a surefire Hall of Famer, and that was Allen Iverson. Again, I'm not comparing overall skills as a player, I'm comparing these guys' achievements and careers with Howard's. Both of these guys were dominating the league in their prime. They both led their team of players who weren't the greatest to the NBA Finals against the Lakers. Iverson did win an MVP, but like I said, Dwight Howard finished second in MVP voting the year Derrick Rose won it. Iverson was a 4-time scoring champion. Dwight was a 3-time consecutive Defensive Player of the Year. Iverson was a 3-time steals leader, and Dwight was a 5-time rebounding leader and a 2-time leader in blocks. But then both of these guys had disappointing careers after they left their original team, with a lot of it based on their attitudes. Because Dwight's failed with the Lakers, Rockets, Hawks, Hornets, and now he's on the Wizards, and Iverson played solid for the Nuggets, but failed on the Pistons and Grizzlies, and was never the same player. So with all that being said, Iverson was a first ballot Hall of Famer without question. So with all these similarities, does Dwight really not deserve to make the Hall of Fame at all? And this is something I want to see all your guys' opinions on. but to be honest, it's something that none of us will really know for sure, and the only people that are gonna know are the Hall of Fame committee. So unless something crazy happens this season or within the next few years, probably not, they'll have to decide if half of a Hall of Fame worthy career is enough to make it, when the other half was filled with solid stats, but problems with every other team and teammate. Dwight doesn't have a great reputation at this point with the media or the basketball community, so it's going to be interesting to see. And one day down the line, maybe 10 years from now, we'll get the answer for sure. But for now, like I said, don't forget to comment your thoughts on this and let me know what you think. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.